guys, welcome to another whiskey review. My name is Andrew, if you don't know that by now, and I am a whiskey enthusiast. What does it mean to be a whiskey enthusiast? What it means is that when we look at this bottle of whiskey, we see more than just a beverage that one can utilize to get intoxicated. Whiskey is not simply made to be a beverage to be utilized to reach a level of intoxication. That's what vodka is made for. The literal definition of vodka is an odorless, flavorless, alcoholic liquid, with some other qualifications. But literally, the point of vodka is to be consumable ethanol, consumable alcohol with nothing else to it. It serves one purpose: to add consumable ethanol to something for you to drink. Whiskey, on the other hand, is not made for that purpose. Can it do that? Sure, but that is not why it is made. Whiskey, from when it's distilled and mashed to when it's barreled in an oak cask, the point of all of that is actually to give whiskey flavor. It is supposed to be anything but flavorless. Whiskey is supposed to contain as much flavor as possible. It's supposed to contain complexities of flavor and nuances of flavor, which means that whiskey is supposed to provide you with an experience in drinking, both personal and social. Whiskey, because of the way that it's made, has art to it and craftsmanship. It has science to it and the chemistry of compounds that gives it flavor. It has a huge experience of flavors that you can analyze, that you can dig into, that you can actually enjoy. You can sip on it. You can taste something that you will not taste in any other liquid or anything in general. Whiskey has flavors that you will not find in anything else. Whiskey is made to be experienced, to provide you with good experiences, both personal through the things we just talked about, and socially, because whiskey has this really cool ability to take people who may have nothing else in common and make them friends over a couple of good pours together. And that's really cool. That's what it means to be a whiskey enthusiast. That's why we do these videos, because we want to enjoy an experience personally and socially with all of you. So tonight, as you can see, we are going to review the Thomas H. Handy Sazerac Rye whiskey. You've probably heard of it if you're into whiskey. It is part of the Buffalo Trace Antique Collection. As you can see, I don't have my typical reviewing flannel on. I've got a Respect the Buffalo, the mighty, mighty Buffalo Trace Distillery, who is the modern day king of highly allocated, highly sought after bourbons, whiskeys, things everybody wants and nobody can find. Buffalo Trace is the modern day king at creating those, and the BTAC, the Antique Collection, is the poster child of them. So, honestly, I'm not going to talk about the BTAC today. I'm not going to talk about anything that has to do with this bottle's prestige as a member of the Buffalo Trace Antique Collection. I'm not concerned about that. There are 19 new posts a day in the WBSC group talking about that. What I am concerned with is, how does this whiskey taste? How does it taste in its retail-ish price range? How does it taste for its marked up and secondary prices that you'll very commonly see it at? And how does it taste compared to other rye whiskeys? Because as an enthusiast, I am not a collector. I do not care about having trophies that will never get opened, that will sit on my shelf until I'm tired of looking at them, and then I can go and try and sell them to somebody for a really marked up price. I have no interest in that. What I do have interest in is buying great whiskeys to consume them, to experience them, like we've been talking about for the last 4 minutes. So, what I care about is, how does this BTAC whiskey hold up as a purchase to drink and enjoy? That's what we're going to talk about. Let's get into the tasting. I should mention, this is the 2016 TH Handy. It is not this year's. However, each batch, each year should taste relatively the same. Will there be batch variation? Of course there will be, but each TH Handy should still taste like Handy with some minor, some minor peculiarities. So, tasting the 2016, I will still feel confident in applying my evaluation of it to really any other year's batches. If you want to argue with me about that, we can do that for sure. So let's get into it. TH Handy is made from Buffalo Trace's standard rye mash bill, which means it has the same mash as the Sazerac rye, as well as the old Sazerac 18 rye, baby Saz and old rye, or an old Saz, as I'll call them. It's also aged approximately 6 years. It's then bottled straight from the cask, no filtering, no cutting with water. This is unfiltered, barrel proof. So what we basically have here is a barrel proof baby Saz, of course with much pickier barrel selection in a lot smaller batch. That makes this a really limited once a year release. So let's get into it. Let's start with the nose. Right up front, there's a nice layer of dusty spices, things like cinnamon, clove, things that you expect to find in a rye. There's a nice undercurrent of like star anise, if you've ever heard of that. It's very similar to black licorice. There's a heavy molasses note, a nice sweet kind of oaky sugar, and there's something kind of unique that's kind of like an earthy, dirty compost note. That's kind of intertwined with kind of a nutty walnut note, and it kind of sits in the background, but it's definitely noticeable if you really get your nose in. It kind of sits in stark contrast to everything else, almost like it seems out of place, but it actually works in tandem with the dry spices, the sweet anise, caramel note. It just kind of sits there and provides contrast. It's interesting. It's a nice nose. It's cohesive. It's fairly restrained and laid back. There's no tickle. This is 126.2 proof, 63.1% ABV. You wouldn't know it from the nose. Let's go to the palate. The first thing I notice here on the palate is a really nice, full, syrupy body. Fantastic mouthfeel. It's dense, it's syrupy, anything but thin. Fantastic mouthfeel. You get right up front another big dollop of anise and kind of a vanilla complex here, which actually reminds me a lot of what you find in Baby Saz. Makes sense. It's much bolder here. I'm not a big fan of Baby Saz because I think it's thin. I think it's watery. This is what it should taste like. It's full. It's bold. That licorice, vanilla really just kind of punches you square in the mouth. It's layered here. Underneath that, there's a nice sweet oak again, a sweet caramel. And on the tail end, almost like a raw, unrefined brown sugar note. There's a slightly herbaceous quality that you just find on the tail end and into the finish. But overall, it really sticks to that licorice vanilla with kind of the oak, the raw sugar, the caramel kind of playing supporting roles. The ethanol level here, the heat level, again, 126.2 proof is more than manageable. It's hardly noticeable upon entry. It does crescendo a little bit mid-palate, but then it kind of fades away again, and the finish really is heat-free, which is a sign of excellent craftsmanship. An excellent cut from the distillation was taken to fill the barrels that made this whiskey. That's why you don't have the roughness. You don't have a whole lot of heat in such a way that it's detracting, in such a way that it kind of makes you pucker, it makes your eyes water, makes you go bleh. You know what I mean? Let's do one more sip, man. This is good stuff. We'll get the finish. I'll add some water, give it a score afterwards. The finish is kind of equal parts sweet and bitter. Sweet with a lot of wood sugars, a lot of sweet molasses, bitter with a little bit of char. It's got a nice touch of citrus in the finish that I didn't find either on the nose or the palate. And there's also a nice kind of bouquet of spices again, really clove more than anything here on the finish. Super long finish. As I'm talking, it's still there, pretty intense, kind of fading with that sweet oaky note. Let's give it a score, and then if you want to keep watching, I'm going to add a few drops of water, not because it needs it, but because with any especially foolproof or overproofed whiskey, adding water might unlock an extra dimension of flavor that you might not get otherwise because it's kind of trapped by the high proof. So we'll give that a go. First of all, what will I score this? $87 out of 100. That is an excellent whiskey in my book. Anything in the 80 to 90 range, I would call an excellent whiskey. I don't think it's truly exceptional, but I do think it's excellent. Outside of Booker's Rye, which has like top dog status of any whiskey period pretty much that I've tasted, Handy ranks right there as one of the best ryes I've ever had. I'm not a huge fan of that licorice sweet vanilla note in any whiskey, and so it could be higher for you if you're into that flavor. Even though I'm not into that flavor, the mouthfeel, the spices, the complexity, the overall craftsmanship of this rye whiskey is evident when you're smelling and when you're tasting. And that's why it has such a high score for me, because I do really enjoy drinking this, even though I'm not crazy about those licorice notes. That's okay. Not every whiskey has to be like your favorite flavor profile. There's still so much to be enjoyed in a lot of whiskeys, and this is a great example. This is an excellent whiskey, even though I'm not a huge licorice fan. All right, let's add a little bit of water. Thank you, Greg Kevorkian, for this old Kentucky limestone mixing water. Just a few drops. There will be a video eventually to find out if this stuff is legit or if it's total BS. That will come someday. Alright. I told you I was going to talk about how good I think this is for its kind of place in the market. For retail-ish, if you can find this from its true retail price of I think $99, maybe up to a respectable price still of $120 to $130, I would tell you to go ahead and buy it. Remember, I'm talking about if you're buying this to drink, not to show it off to your buds or to show it off to strangers online that, oh, I got some Buffalo Trace Antique Collection. That's cool. You should be excited if you find it. But I'm not talking about if you're buying it for a trophy. I'm talking about if you're buying it to actually drink and enjoy. Yes, I would buy this if I could find it between $90 and $120. Absolutely, I would. Above that, I think on secondary and even in stores, you'll see this well over $300. Screw that, dude. Not even close. Not worth it to me. Would I pay $100? Yes. Would I pay hundreds? Absolutely not. There is too much great whiskey to drop that much on a single bottle, in my opinion. And like I said, this is a great rye whiskey, but it is only marginally better, in my opinion, than another rye whiskey like Pikesville. I think it's the best example that comes to mind. So let's do one more quick tasting with a few drops of water added, and then we'll sign off on this video. More spicy, less sweet on the nose, a lot more baking spice, cinnamon, clove, less caramel, less sweetness overall. That earthy compost note, still there, still unique, still doing its thing. I'm not sure I like the palate better with water. The heat level, which was fine to begin with, really doesn't change. Remember, I only added a few drops. My goal wasn't to dilute it, just to maybe open it up. What it does do is it gives it a lot more spices. Not typical baking spices, cinnamon, nutmeg, clove, etc., but more spicy spices. A little bit of cayenne, a little bit of paprika when you add in that water. The cinnamon becomes less of like a sweet cookie cinnamon and more of like a cinnamon red hot cinnamon, like big red gum. Maybe that's your thing, it's not mine. I would probably enjoy this 10 times out of 10, undiluted, no water. However, if you got a full bottle, of course, you've got plenty of pours to experiment and to try it with both. So, that's all for tonight. Thank you for watching, guys. We'll be back with more whiskey review videos. I hope you have a fantastic day. Cheers.